All right, so Lumix, Panasonic, the S1 Mark II came out. And, anybody who knows this channel knows I'm not big on, jumping on the latest and greatest new camera with all the latest and greatest specs that, appears and suddenly makes every other camera seem like it's garbage. I'm not doing that. I still think the S5 is amazing. And now I'm just talking about Lumix because obviously this has nothing to do with anybody else, but well, I guess it does because it kind of reverberates, along all of the camera companies like Canon and Fuji and Nikon and, everybody. Sony. I think the best thing about the S1 Mark II, first of all, it sounds like an incredible camera. Like it sounds amazing. If I had a lot of money, I might even buy it. If I just had disposable money, or if I was looking for a camera because I wasn't happy with what I was using or something broke at the price point that they're selling it at, it actually makes a lot of sense and it sounds remarkable. It sounds like it kind of, solved a lot of problems that people are, focused on or complaining about for a long time, rolling shutter, things like that. Seems like, it's got all the open gate capabilities, all the anamorphic stuff, all the video assist features. It sounds amazing. So I think the best thing about it is that it's going to make other amazing cameras come way down in price. Like now, when you go to eBay and MPB, suddenly the S5 IIX is going to come way down, the S5 II. Like so many cameras are going to go down in price. The Panasonic GH7, probably the FX3 is finally going to go down in price a little bit. Even though, I think people who use Sony are like diehard Sony users. But I believe, I've even seen some Sony, creators or influencers or whatever you want to call them saying, is this the FX3 killer finally? Like the FX3 has kind of been that full frame, portable, run and gun kind of camera that everybody kind of goes to. And I think maybe this is the one that'll, kind of knock it off its stoop a little bit and maybe bring it down in price. Maybe you'll be able to get an FX3 under $3,000 now. But I think the S5 II, the S5 IIX, like the original S5 is probably bottomed out. It's like you can get it for like somewhere between $700 and $800 now. That's crazy. But the S5 IIX, the S5 II, I don't know. I think maybe even the Canon R5 II, like, I don't know. I just think that when something like this happens and it comes out and everybody thinks it's so unbelievably amazing, I think that it improves the used market, and I think it will, create a lower entry point for a lot of people to have an incredibly capable camera. Even more, like I'm still using the original S5. I love the S5. It's mainly because, autofocus is not really a part of my workflow with the lenses that I have. The lenses that I use 99.9% of the time are either vintage lenses or anamorphic lenses. So they're all manually focused lenses. But if I was an autofocus person, I would be thinking, damn, this is, like if I had a lot of autofocus lenses, if it was a part of my workflow, if it was, really necessary for the kind of work that I do, this sounds like an amazing camera at an amazing price. And it might even come down in price once this whole tariff thing gets straight, if it gets straight, I don't know. But it's at a pretty cool price point right now. So personally, I think that's the best thing about the S1 Mark II. I think that it'll bring, like I'm thinking a lot about the GH7 for people. I don't know how it's going to affect the S1R Mark II. I think people look at the S1R as more photography, and the S1 Mark II, apparently, it seems like it's more for video. And are they going to come out with an S1H Mark II? And is that going to have like internal ND filters and a optical low-pass filter, perhaps? I don't know. Is it going to have other options, connectivity options? Is it going to be a box camera? Like, who knows? That might affect it as well. But it seems like this is kind of the perfect camera for a lot of people. And so it's pretty exciting, I mean, of course, you know, so I watched the Gerald Undone video, and I didn't really watch any other videos because they're all the same, you know. I mean, I just can't watch anymore. It just bores me at this point. You know, they're cameras, you know what I mean? You put a lens on, you have your controls, you know, you try to expose properly, you try to focus properly, you know, you got to write a great script or you have to have a great event. I mean, I don't know. People watch reviews, I think, because they're into the creators. They like the people's personalities, so, and that's cool. But for me, once I see Gerald Undone, or maybe I'll watch somebody else, a couple of people, I'm good. I can't watch any more after that. It's like clear to me it's an amazing camera. It's solved all the problems. It does everything. It looks beautiful. It's L-mount. That's the information we need. You know, it's like, yeah, I think it sounds amazing as a hybrid camera. And it sounds like it's a bona fide cinema camera, to be honest with you, even though it's not bodied in that way. I think more and more we're kind of morphing all of these cameras together to work across platforms of, you know, what is a cinema camera at this point? You know, what is it? I mean, if this thing can handle being out in the field, if it can connect with people, you know, I mean, what's going to happen to like focus pullers at some point? Like if everything has amazing autofocus, are we even going to need focus pullers? Are you even going to have to think about connecting to other people? Like it's something to think about. You know, I think that, you know, it reminds me of AI in general. You know, it's like putting a lot of people out of work probably, because these cameras are getting to the point where they do everything themselves, you know. It sounds like it has unbelievable stabilization, you know, in-body IBIS, and so you don't need gimbals anymore. You know, if what everybody's saying is true. Obviously, I don't have the camera in my hands, and nobody's given me a camera because I have like very few followers. But, you know, I don't personally use a gimbal anyway. I have a gimbal, and, you know, have I used it ever? Yeah, a couple of times. There were some shots that I wanted it to look like it was a gimbal shot. But generally, I don't even like the way those shots look. They're just too smooth for me. It's just not my personal aesthetic. It's not my thing. But I do like when a camera has great stabilization. Like the S5 to me has great stabilization, but I've kind of learned to use it because I've had it for so long and I've done so many projects with it and I know how to use it. I know the camera. So to me, this camera has amazing stabilization. But I'm assuming if I picked up the S1 Mark II or even like the GH7 or something like that, maybe it would be even better. I have a GH5, so I do have a micro four thirds camera, and the stabilization on that camera is unbelievable. It's amazing to me. And I love the GH5 too. So the S1R Mark II, I'm sorry, the S1 Mark II, not the R, the S1 Mark II. I think one of the fun things is to see if some people switch back to Panasonic now after, like I watched a plethora of videos over the last few months, people talking about Panasonic is dead, they're not doing anything, you know, nobody wanted to wait for them, so they bought into another camera company, you know, like a number of people. And, you know, it makes sense. I mean, how long are you going to wait? And, you know, these companies keep things under wraps so hard, you know what I mean? Like you never know when somebody's going to come out with, you know, some kind of upgrade. You know, it's like, I don't understand why it's such a big, I guess marketing and sales and stuff like that, but, you know, it'd be interesting to see who comes back to Lumix now, and if suddenly Lumix is, you know, the new company, you know, after, you know, Blackmagic came out with that 6K full frame camera, and it got trashed by a lot of people, but some of the influencers that I really respect, some of the filmmakers that I really think are doing real work, they love that full frame camera. They're talking about it's like legendary, even though it still has the original body, which a lot of people think is plasticky and not professional or whatever. But, you know, the people that I'm following, they're professionals. Like they're doing high level work and they love that camera. And of course, you know, the 6K Pro is APS-C, but, you know, Super 35, but, you know, I guess it's considered not as good as the full frame just because it's full frame. You know, like you'll get a little bit more noise in the shadows, but I mean, at this point, you know, if you're using DaVinci Resolve at least, you can get rid of all the noise. Like the noise reduction is ridiculous. And if you know what you're doing, if you know how to light, and if you know how to expose, and if you're, you know, paying attention to the fundamentals of filmmaking, that's not a problem. So if you have a 6K Pro, you don't need to upgrade. If you have a 6K full frame, you don't need to upgrade. If you have a Panasonic S5 IIX, I'm thinking you don't really need to upgrade. Like for what? Like what, you know, maybe the rolling shutter, like, but does rolling shutter really enter into the equation in the work that you do? Does it really warrant upgrading? That's just something you have to think about. Like the only person who can answer those kind of questions are the users, you know? And the marketing will tell you 100% of the time that you need to upgrade. But I don't think, I don't want to tell people what to do, but for me, again, I don't feel like even upgrading from my S5 and my GH5. Like I got these two cameras, they look beautiful. I have my anamorphic lenses, I got my vintage lenses. Everything looks awesome to me. I'm getting what I want. My workflow is something that I'm really comfortable with. I don't feel like anything's getting in my way. I feel really free to create. I feel like, I can focus on my script. I can focus on the story. I can focus on my acting. I can focus on all the most important parts of filmmaking and not think like, damn, this camera's getting in my way. I'm not frustrated, I'm not feeling like I can't get something done because of the gear that I have. I think if I felt that way, then I would probably pay more attention and get myself a better camera. But honestly, the only reason I would upgrade is because I would be feeling like left out or something like that. But for no apparent reason, as you know, and as many people say, most people who own cameras, they don't use but like 20% of the capability of that camera. Like once you figure out what you need from a camera, you just use that over and over again because that's the way you shoot. That's what you do. You're not, the idea is not to max out the camera, to use every bit of the capability of that camera. That's not the idea, right? I mean, unless you're Gerald Undone, I guess, because that's what he does. That's his job, to tell us what the camera can do, how far it can go. So I can understand that. But if you're using it to make stories, do documentaries, do narrative films, things like that, if you're using it to do weddings, to do corporate work, to do short films, to do any kind of client work, social media stuff, you just need to get to the story. You need to get to the end. When you're finished, when you get, you shoot everything and you edit everything and now you get to deliver it, that's what you're getting to. So you're not going to deliver something that looks perfect and beautiful and go, damn, I didn't use the waveforms. I only used the zebras. I got to start over. I didn't use false color. How could I have not done that? I mean, it looks perfect, but why didn't I use false color? Why do I even have it in my camera? That's a good question. Sometimes you got to think, what if I have all this stuff stuffed in my camera and I don't use 80% of it? Do I need that camera? Or can I find something $2,000 less or $4,000 less? Think about it. That's a thing. So, delivery is a big thing. People require, some people, you might work for somebody and they're like, I want 6K delivery, or I want 8K or whatever, 12K if you have the Pixis. So yeah, you do have to think about that kind of stuff if that's the world you're living in and working in. But if not, again, to come full circle in this video, I think the best part of the S1 Mark II and the S1 Mark IIe is that it's going to bring down the price of so many other cameras now. Great cameras, high level. You might be able to, I can see like the S5 IIX winding up in that 1,300, 1,200 category pretty soon. The S5 II is already there. FX30 is probably going to come way down in price. It's already way down in price. Sony's running all kinds of sales. So who knows what they're coming up with next. And now that Lumix has done this, you probably get a Panasonic GH7 for, I think it's been like $2,200. It's going to come down in price. And personally, I love shooting micro four thirds. It just feels like you have control over everything. I guess it's because the stabilization and the readout is so fast, and like you don't really have a lot of the problems that other full frame cameras have. And unless you're shooting in like extremely dark scenarios all the time, I'm assuming you never feel any kind of limitations with the GH7. You know, especially if you get really fast lenses. Like I've been doing a bunch of photography with my GH5 recently. I'm working on a project, and I'm using a Mikey 35mm f1.4 lens. Now that means it's a 70mm equivalent lens on my micro four thirds, and the depth of field that I'm getting on it is ridiculous. I can completely blow out the background. And you know, obviously 70mm, I'm getting an incredibly great reach, and it's a really sharp lens, and it just looks beautiful. You know, that's what it's all about. I mean, whether you're shooting micro four thirds, APS-C, full frame, if you know what you're doing, if you have the right glass, you can get exactly what you want. I mean, I guess if you want to complain and you don't have quite the amount of bokeh and you don't have the extreme creamy background that you wanted, okay, then buy a full frame camera. I mean, it is true. You know, if you shoot all three, like APS-C, micro four thirds, and full frame in the exact same scenario, the full frame does have the ability to get a little bit more blurred background. Like the depth of field does look a little bit different, but you know, I can't think of any scenario where it really matters. Not really, as long as you have the correct lenses. And as long as you know what you're doing in terms of getting close enough to the subject, or, you know, but, you know, yeah, if you want to get the exact frame that you need, just have the fastest lenses. I mean, there are 0.95 aperture lenses for micro four thirds. That's like as fast as any full frame lens. I mean, like the way people look at this is like out of control, because you can't get exactly what you want. So anyway, I guess I just wanted to chime in that what I think the best thing about the S1 Mark II is that it's going to bring down the price of other cameras. It's going to create an entry level that's even more, you know, accessible to more people who don't have the amount of money to spend, don't have $3,200 to get into a new camera, but maybe they have $1,200, $1,300, maybe they have $800 or $700 to get this camera, or maybe they have $350 or $400 to get a GH5. It's going to continue to bring down the price. I mean, there are some cameras that are kind of bottomed out already. I think the GH5 is bottomed out. I think the GH5S is bottomed out. You can get them both for somewhere between $450 and $700. I think the S5 is kind of bottomed out. It's $750-ish, $800. I think, you know, the opportunities are amazing right now. I think even with all the craziness with the tariffs and, you know, the prices being risen because so many of these parts come from China, even with that, the prices right now are really, really good. And this camera can only help that. So, yeah. That's what I wanted to say about the Panasonic Lumix S1 Mark II. Good luck with that.